The cool thing, I really like this picture because this is a small little spinal cord. This is a vertebra. This is the bump in the back of the neck or the back that you can touch. These are the spinous processes. So it's a very well protected little structure that's probably about the size of your pinky in diameter. So it's really small, but has a lot going on inside. What you can also see here is the protections around it, how sort of the spinal cord is embedded in um, in the in the bony um, neural arch. Really, it's inside that neural arch that's created there. So the spinal column is really interesting because it's flexible, but it's really protective as well. Um, what is in the spinal cord are nerve tracts, which are pathways, and then also cell bodies, nerve cells, and those are mostly used for reflexes down there. Some low level integration. Let me get through it here. See, you see, this is a cross section. You see the white stuff on the outside. This now is the whites on the outside, not like in the brain where the whites on the inside. And the white part is mostly nerve tract, which is connections between one part of the body and the other part of the body. So they're mostly axons that are traveling. And then on the inside, the gray matter, that is the cell body part. So that's where we have some interaction, some integration of the material. Like, for example, the reflexes, like you tap the front of your knee and your leg goes up. That's a reflex. That's completely happening at the spinal cord level. Of course, you also get a message up to the brain to understand that something happened, or you can actually see your leg go up. But the reaction itself leaves the brain out, and so we can use that to test, the integrity of the spinal cord of not the spinal cord, but also some low level pathways if they really work or not. Um, when I look at the spinal cord from the side, you see this is the length of it. It goes to about L2 ish, so middle of the low back kind of level, and after that you just have free floating nerves going on, and they have different names, those kind of things. The reason why that is because when we are made and then when we grow, the nervous system grows less, or the spinal cord grows less than the bones and the muscles, and so it slowly gets pulled up over time, and then we're adults, it's up here, and the rest is just nerve. It's a good thing because when we need an epidural or some injection in the in like epidural for giving birth, for example, the baby, we can go and put the needle down below where the spinal cord is, so we are not risking to puncture the spinal cord, which is not really what we want to do. And you can only visualize how, relatively speaking, the needle is pretty darn big for that small little thing. So we also have from the side a thickening area around the neck, lower neck, and then one in the lumbar spine, and those are indicative of more action going into the arms and the legs than just in terms of the trunk. So that's what that is about. And then, generally speaking, we talked about the nervous system in general, where we have a receptor picks up some information, and then we have a sensory nerve carries that information to the brain, and then in the brain we have an interaction going on or information processing, and then we have an output on the motor end, a pathway or a nerve going to the effector organ, a muscle, a gland, or a other nerve, and then it has a reaction. And so you see that quite well established in the spinal cord, where we have pathways that go from below up into the brain, and we have pathways that go down to the body from the brain. We call the ones, the sensory ones, often they call them ascending, and the ones that go down, we call them descending. And so that's when we then, from there, with that basic understanding, these are just some names that are part of that spinal cord labeling thing that you're going to pick up in the video. But when we look at the, what was I talking about? Oh, the information in and the information out. When we look at then the cross section of a spinal cord, which is where we have it here, we see the blue is very specifically in the spinal cord where the sensory nerves go in to the spinal cord, and so it's very well organized in there. And then where the spinal cord, the motor nerves come out. So there's two pathways that get created. One is an in pathway, one is an out pathway. So we're going to give those labels. And blue usually stands for sensory, and red usually stands for motor output. And then in the inside where we have these gray areas where that indicate cell bodies, we can then we can then locate where which kind of cell bodies are. And in the back end are the ones that are sensory, come in to the, and then in the front end are some that are more motor. And so we'll learn a little bit about that and or how that is organized in the spinal cord in the cross section. Everything in the spinal cord is, you kind of think of electricity stuff going around. As everything is, or like a, you know, a thing on the side of the road where the phone company has when they go in and they have to move things around and change the different lines. It's all kind of organized like that, very specific. Because these here, this white stuff here, this is pathways. These are called tracts. When we look at the spinal cord, and if you look at how they're organized, it's really cool. Look at that. They have this whole organizational thing where they really map everything out. We don't have to study that, but I want you to get an idea of it. And because one of the things that's really interesting is when it comes to naming of these different parts, these different tracts, they name them from where they go to where they come from, or where they come from to where they go. And so you can actually, once you understand the situation a little bit, that's why I don't want you to have to study all of that. You can like look at this and go like, for example, it says spinocerebellar tract. So you know this goes from the spine to the cerebellum, which is the back of the head part of the brain. Or here he says corticospinal tract. So you can see this goes from the cortex, the head, down to the spine. So, and I'm telling you that because one of the things you get in this chapter is you get a bunch of names, but again, I'm trying to give you the overarching, also in the text, idea of it. I don't need you to study all the details on this. I don't know all the details on this. I used to know more of it, but that's stuff that kind of over time, if we don't use it, we kind of forget about it a little bit. All right, so that's that part of it. And then after that, in this chapter, I'm mostly gonna talk about a few different pathways that bring information into the brain and then bring information back out from the brain to the body. So we just study a couple of those most common pathways, or how they are structured, and we understand the whole system a little bit through them. So it's really kind of interesting. It's all electricity stuff. So here we have more tracts, more of that, and then secondarily, what we're going to do in this chapter is we're going to talk about the reflexes, and we're going to label the different parts of the reflexes, which is like we've done it already. We have a receptor, a sensory, an integration, a motor, and an effector. Those are those same as the homeopathic thing. If you remember from chapter 1, we have the homeostatic negative feedback loop. That's the same kind of setup. So things kind of repeat themselves in the body. All right, let me make sure I didn't forget anything on this front. Let me go up real quick, double check. That's all good. All right. And then as a last part to this chapter, I didn't do the cranial nerves. Cranial nerves are also, they're not part of the spinal cord because they are in the brain, but they are describing nerves, that pathways that go directly from the body into the brain, bypassing the spinal cord because they're in the head mostly, and then also the opposite pathways that go from the brain then to the things like the facial muscles, for example. This is where we have things like the smell nerves come in, or we have things like the vision, the optic comes in. And so you don't have to memorize in this class. but I want to give you a good overview. This slide is actually, I'm really proud of this slide actually because I have a lot of data on it. I have the name, I have what it does, and then cranial nerves are also having a Roman numeral assigned to them. So I want you to get an overview of that in this chapter. This is also kind of a cool slide because it tells you with visuals what we're doing, and it's not just words. And then lastly, we have a brief discussion about the autonomic nervous system. And what I need us to understand mainly in the autonomic nervous system is that it's automatic. We don't think about it, it just happens. And this is where we organize the things like breathing, like blood pressure, I mean, heart rate and stuff like that. And we have two extreme parts to it. We have one that's called the sympathetic nervous system, or also known as the fight or flight nervous system. And that one prepares the body for action, for physical energy using things like danger stuff that we need to react to. For example, a lion in the corner, you need to run away as fast as you can so you don't get eaten by it. So that's the what that nervous system does. And so when we study it, we're going to go, and I like the graphics here, we're going to go through things like the heart rate goes up, the pupils get dilated so we can get as much information in the body, etc., stuff like that. This is when the cat gets, or the animals, but it's even the cat real well, the hair in the back stands up because it wants to make itself bigger. This is also one of those reactions that the animals have. And then opposing that is sort of a conserving energy system that we use to replenish our energy state because we might have used up a lot of ATP when we run away from a lion and we need to gather that back up. Or maybe we pull the muscle even or something, and then the muscular system needs to, not maybe pull, but replenish the things that, repair it a little bit. And so that's described in the parasympathetic nervous system, and we often call that the rest and digest kind of nervous system. So that's these are the two opposing extremes, and we want to utilize both in ourselves. And this is one place where we have to consciously override our ourselves because we generally spend time in the sympathetic nervous system. And since we all at this point pretty much are FOMO creatures with these phones, we got to really be careful not to overuse the sympathetic nervous system. So that's another reason why it's good to study that, so we get an idea of why it is good to do a little meditation or chill out for a little bit. Don't feel guilty about that. Well, if it's excessively, we can call it lazy, but we're not talking about that. And then, so I just then have a couple of slides here where it describes a little bit more what it does or where it comes from also. What's interesting is the sympathetic nervous system comes from the center of the body, the thoracic and the lumbar area. And the parasympathetic comes from the cranium, the head, and then also the sacral area. So that Bells is my doggy. So that's pretty much it for that nervous system. The few more things of what neurotransmitters get released. It's just some information that can be interesting, but don't get overwhelmed by it too much. Just have an initial learning on it, and then when we get to the test or have it parallel, if you haven't done that before, make sure you do so. Have the test review handy. Back to the test review real quick. Make sure you have that with you because otherwise this is a lot of material until we get to the test. But in this test review, I've mentioned it multiple times. We got these. Oh, I think that was no, that's a good one. We got I think it's a 5-pager, and I spell everything out. So as we get down here, endocrine, skin, neural, brain. No, there we go. Oh, look at that. Yeah, see here we have some of these discussions in here, there, and then we get into the senses organ in here. So if you cover these points and you understand all these points, you gotta be good for the test. So make sure you go to the test review early if you haven't so far. Print out these pages or at least download them so you can reference back when you listen to the lectures. Okay, so then the second chapter to me is even more fun, I think. The chord is a lot of data points, but not that much action. I mean, it's very important because without it, we'd definitely be messed up. But as it comes to physiological, interesting stuff, the sensory system is very cool because that's where we talk about the eyes and the hearing and all that kind of stuff. So let's go through that briefly. If you have any questions, speak up. Who do I have? Some of you here, I think, right? Oh yeah, look, we have some add-ons. Hi everyone. So the sensory system is is very interesting. These are the receptors that pick up what's going on in the outside environment, but also inside of the body. And we start up really fast with this definition of sensation versus perception. So we talk really about sensation when we talk about the sensory system, but then perception is when we interpret what we have sensed. So this is when you recognize a face that you have seen before, for example, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's you, kind of thing. And the sensory system brings the picture into the brain. In terms of general sensory systems, these are not the special senses. Oh, well, these include the special senses, but we have a lot of them that are located in the skin, for example. Um, Superficially, we have them deep, we have in muscle tendons, or even if we have deep pressure. That is very important, actually. If you know, for example, a lot of us like weighted blankets because it calms us down. Or that's probably where we can discuss a physically really a deep hug if somebody is hurting and we want to help, and just give them a good hug. Do you need that? That's partly that. Or autistic people do like pressure a lot because it releases deep sensor receptors release a lot of calming neurotransmitters in the brain. So we also have senses in the internal organs. We need to be able to pick up what's going on inside the body. And then we have the special senses, and those are the ones we mostly talk about in that chapter. Those are the eyesight, that's the smell, that's the hearing, the balance, that kind of stuff. We can group senses in between simple or complex, and also what kind of stimulus they pick up. When we look at what kind of stimulus they pick up, we have thermal sensors, we have pain sensors, we have photosenses. Noci means pain, actually. Actually, noci means danger, but that's where the discussion can go very fast. That danger is the body's language to tell you. I mean, pain is the body's language to tell you that something's wrong. You got to pay attention to. So short-term pain medicine is good. Long-term, well, it's maybe necessary because chronic pain is really a serious problem, but it often happens because we don't pay attention to when it's more short-term, and then it comes long-term. Mechanoreceptors are the ones that tell the body where we are in space, and chemoreceptors pick up chemicals like calcium in the bloodstream. Make sure we have enough of it. And then when we look at complexity of the receptors, then we very fast go into the vision, into the hearing, the smell, but also in the general senses, the ones in the skin. We dare talk about free nerve endings, which is kind of pain. They're just nerve endings like fingers reaching into the tissue. And if one of those nerves is touched, cut, broken, then that sends the pain signal. We also have receptors that are in the skin that are sort of have an onion layer of cell membrane around it. And they're often pressure sensors because as we push down, those layers touch each other, and that sends up the signal. This is kind of cool. Another thing that's really interesting, and we've done that with the salt kind of thing, sodium receptors, they're adaptive. So some receptors are adaptive, which means we get used to the stimulus. So if you put your hand in cold water and the other one in hot water, and then you'll have a lukewarm water thing, and after a little while you put both hands in the lukewarm water thing, the one that came from the hot, it appears to be cold, and the one that came from the cool, it appears to be hot. And so that tells you that we have an adaptive stimulus when it comes to thermal stimulus, because we get used to the heat or the cold, and that's a good thing. But then we have a few receptor types that are not adaptive for good reason, and one of them is pain, because we don't want to walk on a side of our ankle and first it hurts, but then it don't hurt no more. We got used to it, and so within no time our ankle will be destroyed. So that would not be a good idea if that would be an adaptive sense. The other one that's definitely not adaptive is the proprioceptor, which is it's proprioceptor, which is the that tells you where the body is in space. The mechanoreceptor from before actually just picks up all kind of touch kind of things, so it's inclusive. Sorry, I meant proprioceptors. Then this thing here is a really cool thing. This is good to know because this is called the gate theory. And so when you have a pain stimulus that goes into the brain, it stimulates the brain, goes ouch, 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 out. You can counterbalance that with a stimulus that's a mechanical stimulus, like the proprioception stimulus, or when the kid runs into the wall with the forehead, you start rubbing his head and go like, it's okay, and you give it kisses. Because the mechanoreceptors that go into the brain, they use the same area to travel, and they're gonna override the pain stimulus to a large extent. This is also the mechanism why, when you have a back pain, your most likely best remedy for a back pain is take a walk. I know it's counterintuitive because we don't want to get out of bed when we hurt, but I can speak from personal experience. I have serious back pain at times. Like I can't tie my shoe level back pain. But after a walk, and maybe that one is a slow walk to start with, after massaging these joints and these muscles, everything feels much, much better. So you can use that theory if you have to talk to somebody about maybe you should take a walk. So that's kind of cool. Another thing that's kind of cool about the receptor world is like how dense are receptors? Um, how dense are they in a skin area that will pick up the appropriate stuff? Let me put this in a different way. Not many receptors or all receptors are responsible for one specific area in the body that they account for. And that's not always the same. For example, if you look at your thumb has a huge amount of receptors in it, or your fingertips in general, that we have a very, very fine amount of ability to pick up some stuff. Some like we can put a hand in a pocket and pick up and say, this is a dime or this is a quarter. We can feel that. But if we would have that in the back, our brain would be way overtaxed with input because we don't need that level of tactile ability in a back. And so in an area where we don't need that, there's just many, many fewer nerve endings that go, receptors that go to that area. And the field that they pick up, they call that the receptive field, the area that they need to account for, that one nerve ending, is much, much larger. And so that in the back, we will have a very large receptive field. In the thumb, we have a very small receptive field. And so that's kind of an interesting thing. And we can test that. We can take some kind of two pointy things, and we can first put them close together and then further apart, and then till when a person says, oh, this is 1 point, and at some point they say, oh, I feel 2 points, then you know you've reached two different nerve endings to pick it up. I use that in massage because if I massage a back, I'm massaging them like that with my hands open, my fingers spread. And the person thinks I have huge hands because they don't feel what's in between. But if I go and work on a face or work on a hand, I can't do that because they will feel that difference. So that's another thing that comes is the receptors. And then from there, we mainly go to the special senses. And we start with the eye. Or if you have any questions, just interrupt me. We start with the eye and we go through the anatomy. We look at the eyeball, but then and then we look at all these different structures. It's pretty cool stuff. Well, the eye is pretty intense. I mean, have you ever thought about how you're gonna see a picture and it's gonna see make a nerve impulse that then in the back of the head I'm gonna project the picture on and it's gonna be seeing it like a movie theater? That's pretty spectacular. And that happens right here in these nerve endings in here. And these nerve endings are actually all the way at the back of the eyeball. The light comes in here. They're at the back of the eyeball. That's where they're located. And the coolest thing about this whole thing, when you look at, see, and you got to go through muscles that move the eyeball. We got videos for all that stuff. The cool thing, though, when you bring it down to the level, it is a shift in a molecule, the way it looks, a rotation around the bond that sends off the photo coming in, the light coming in, and then from a light it becomes electricity, and then it gets sent to the brain. So to me, that's just phenomenal how that works. It's like from a cis to a trans isomer. Yeah, by the way, if you're, that's where the name comes from the gender situation, the cis and the trans. But I'm sure you all know that. But so that's to me is the most fascinating thing there is. And so the whole part of this chapter goes around to explain how do we get the light in, what are all these parts called, and then how, to some level, it's not that easy, but how do the light go into the brain? And one of the things that's kind of goofy with our body, that's where it's like, is this really the best design? Not so sure, because look at that. The light has to go in through the eyeball, cross all this whole eyeball thing, and there's all these cells it's going to go through, and then at the back, it's going to get changed into electricity. And so we're going to probably lose a lot of light that comes in, and therefore, our eyesight in an animal world, it's sort of medium range. It's not the best stereos. But that's one of the things where it's a bit like, I wonder. And so the reason then what the body actually does, where we really see very, very sharp, what it tries to do, it tries to push all, you can see that here, it tries to push all those nerves that come after that photoreceptor nerve to the side, and so the light can get in the center vision. The light can get in as cleanly as possible, and that's what we look at here, and that's what is visualized here in here. They call that the fovea centralis. What these names are, you gotta just appreciate these names. That's partially why I don't want to make you study them, memorize them, because I want you to appreciate the language, because the language is actually pretty cool. Just if you have to memorize all that, it becomes a torture sometimes. This here is an area where it's not. You would think this is where we see the clearest, but this is not. This is where the blood vessels, the eyeball on the inside has to have blood vessel. We need nutrients and all that happening, and also then the nerve itself will leave the eyeball and go out as the optic nerve that then ultimately gets into the brain. Where is that pathway? Here. From the eyeball, some of them cross over. This is known as the optic chiasm. This is right by the pituitary gland, and then it goes into the thalamus actually, and then back into the occipital lobe, where we then see into the primary visual cortex. Remember, when you talk about the brain, you got a primary cortex, which is where the sensation comes in, and then we got secondary cortices, where the information gets processed, and so that's then the perception. Vision is pretty interesting because we have to see 3D. If you cover one eye, you don't see 3D, and your visual field is not as wide. If you have both eyes open, what happens is the both eyeballs overlap a little bit, come from two different angles, and then the brain can compute that into a 3D image. So that's really kind of neat, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in this chapter. And then here, this is the discussion about the lens. So what the lens does, the lens refracts the light and makes us sharp vision. So it takes the light coming in, and it changes the angle a little bit of the light rays, that then at the end of the eyeball we get a focused point where we then see, and we it all comes together, and so we then can create the visual spot there, or what they call that. I forgot what they call that. And of course, not all of us see clear, and so then the discussion here goes into well, if the focal point, that's what's called the focal point, gets a little bit too close, not on the retina in the back, which is where those cells lie, then we have a nearsightedness. If it gets too far back, we have farsightedness, and we need different lenses to correct for that refraction error, so to speak. We can have lenses that bend in to bring the light further back, and we can have lenses that round it more. If the focal point is too far back, we need the light to be more refracted to focus right on the retina. So that's where the different kind of glasses come in as an explanation of why, which is really kind of interesting. You just got to go through it a couple times. And then you have a brief discussion about cataracts, which is, when we get the shine get into the eye, like you see it in olders of us. But we can exchange the disc. That's kind of creepy, but it really works really well. They're doing a good job about that. And so we can put in another lens, and then we can see again. But often in the animals, you see it more because we don't do that with them. Astigmatism is when you have the front here, where this is a clear part of the eye where the light comes in. It's called the cornea, and that is not it's not rounded equally. It's got a little misshape to it, and then the picture looks distorted. So we can also account for that when we do glasses, which is really great. Can you imagine walk around with that? Oh, it's probably a little hard. When we look at the visual acuity, when you go to the eye doctor, you have to do that stuff. Look at the different letter sizes, and at some point it's like, oh, I can't see it anymore. And I used to see everything, and now I reached that stage where I can't see it anymore. And so that's called a Snellen eye chart to test sort of screen for visual acuity. And we're going to have an activity on that. So that's sort of our health kit activity, because I can have you print that out and then do it. It's not a big activity. It's kind of but it's nice to know because it's a screen. And with the kids or with other people, it's a good screening tool. And then, of course, you don't give the people glasses. Well, maybe reading glasses, but you go to the eye doctor and have them check out everything, because it's not just that visual acuity they check. And there's actually on the if you don't have a printer, I now have a barcode where there's an app or something that projects it properly, so you can do it with your phone. So that's kind of neat. So we'll do that. And let's see, I think that's pretty much it. There's some pathology, and then, we have some accessory structures. We have eyebrows. Have you ever wondered what eyebrows are for? Oh, they are here that the sweat doesn't drip into the eye, because sweat's salty. It's going to hurt. But of course, they're also good for other things. So we have eyelashes. Also, that's also an accessory structure, really. We have an eyelid. Well, the eyelid with the eyelashes or the accessory structure, so we can cover and moisten the eye. We don't want to keep that eye exposed to the air the whole time. We need the moistness ongoingly. It's a very delicate structure. And then, of course, we have tear glands. We have lacrimal glands. And the lacrimal glands are on the outside of the eye on both sides. And the tears flow to the inside and then drain into the nose. That's why we're going to need it. Well, we need a tissue for the tears too, but we need to blow our nose off when we cry. But this is good to know, because when you get a corner of sand or some irritant in the eyeball and it starts tearing up and you start rubbing it, you don't want to rub it out from the inside out, because you're going to go against the stream. If anything, you want to go with the flow and help it to come out. Of course, it's probably not doing that much, but for sure you don't want to go the opposite. So now we know why that's the case. All right, so that's pretty good for that. And then we go into the hearing and the equilibrium apparatus, and that's also interesting, because now we got to get sound waves, which we collect here with this big funnel-looking thing that directs the sound waves into the ear canal and vibrates the eardrum, and then transmits those vibration forces into this liquid filled, carved out, snail looking bone thing in our petrous portion deep in the head. So that's another one. It's like, how does the body know how to do that? That's just really crazy, but it's really cool. And so what happens in there when we hear, these are all different names for all this stuff, which we're going to learn. But let me talk about this in there. So in this snail in here, it turns around. If we take a cross section of it, it looks like that. It's got a chamber on top that's fluid filled. It's got a middle chamber, it's sort of wedge shaped here, that has a few things on it. That's actually where we do the hearing. And then we got a bottom fluid filled chamber as well. And so the vibration, let me see if I have a better picture for that. The vibration comes in, moves the eardrum, it has a few bones it attaches that move, and then here it pumps. It pumps against this window that they call it a window, but it's like this membrane that then on the inside, the fluid, of course, gets like a wave made. Like, if we could do it in the open, but if it's an enclosed system, the wave then goes through it and can splash, but it's got to escape somewhere. At least it's got to go through somewhere. But if depending on the height of the wave, if it hits the wall, if it's like this high, at some point this snail gets narrower and narrower as we get down, and at some point it hits the wall, and then it crosses the middle portion, the middle membrane part, and goes out the bottom, and here it just pushes that into space to escape, so it doesn't come back and go back and so forth. Like you see that sometimes when you have waves go against the wall, then they go back, and that creates the splash. But what's interesting is when it crosses over this wave will vibrate. See, this is this middle section, and there's this membrane on top that lays on hair cells, like hair cells, and it vibrates and it bends the hair cells, and when it bends the hair cells, you make an electrical impulse and you can hear. Woo! So that's interesting. So basically, vision is a change in molecules. Hearing is a bending of a hair, and balance is the same way. As well, bending over hair, and then the only other thing that we got to cope for is figuring out where along the pathway, how wide or how narrow that pathway gets to which pitch, which height of the wave will push through or pass through that middle section, and that's then the understanding of high or low pitch for us, because where along the pathway that nerve is, it goes to the brain part where we have the appropriate pitch. Now, not everybody has perfect pitch, but if it works perfectly, then those are the people with perfect pitch, where their interpretation of what they hear is exactly what's going on the outside. So that's pretty mechanical for hearing, isn't it? Does that make some sense? Because it's I'm trying to be this pretty fast and an overview, but does that make a general sense to anybody? Nobody? Am I alone here? Anybody still here? Yeah, I got some people here. All right. Nobody want to talk though, huh? Good. Well, then I assume we're doing all right. Let's put this to the side. Should have done that before. Okay, so that's pretty much it, I think. Well, no, not quite. We talked briefly about hearing loss. The interesting thing about hearing loss is it a neural problem, like the vibration doesn't get into the nerve, doesn't get translated into the neural impulse, or is it that the vibration doesn't get to the nerve, and that would be a conductive problem? We can very simply test that by having a tuning fork in space. Can we hear it? Can we hear it? We can't hear it. Versus then putting it on the bone, because the bone vibrates and it doesn't need the vibration, that vibration doesn't need to go through the air, because the bone conducts it and it goes from the bone right into the neural part. And so if we can't hear through the air, but we can still hear when we put it on the bone, then we know there is a problem with the waves getting to the friggin' nerve and not there in the nerve. If we can hear in the air and we cannot hear in the bone, then we know it could be either or, but most likely then it will be a sensory neural deficit or problem. So that's kind of cool how we could test that. Pretty rudimentary and can differentiate that. If equilibrium works similar, the equilibrium, what we have to do there is we have to think about sideways or forward or angular equilibrium. When you do a somersault, do you feel that you're moving forward or sideways? And then that's through these semicircular canals. And then the other one that we have to measure there is acceleration, deceleration. And that happens inside here, where we have some hairs that go up and down and some go sideways. That's like when you get in the elevator and goes up, then you feel that. And then when it slows down, you feel that. And what you feel is actually a membrane is lagging behind the body moving. And so as the body moves, this thicker substance here will drag behind a little bit, and the drag behind will bend those hairs, and then that will create that sensation. You can see that when you spin it. Do we have the spinner? Yeah, when you start spinning, it lags behind, you feel dizzy. At some point you spin, it's like, oh look, it's normal. And then you go like, oh crap, when I stop, it's not normal anymore. And so when it becomes feeling like it's normal, you don't feel like you're spinning in a head anymore, you're not dizzy. That's when that lagging behind sort of catches up with what you're doing, and it sort of is a regular situation where it's the hairs all stand up. But the problem is that when you stop, it all swerves to the other side, and you really get dizzy. And a lot of times that's the kids, like, oh look, it's so fun, and then I fall down. That's what's happening with that. So that's kind of a good place to feel that part. Good. This is all talking about the hairs and giving it different names. I know, and we have to. Everything has a name. And then taste and smell go together. When we eat food, most of what we taste is actually smell. The taste buds are rudimentary. They're in the tongue and in the back of the throat, and they pick up chemicals in liquid in this fluid, and the chemicals fall sort of in here, down in here, in these little they call them papillae, and the taste buds, the nerve cells that pick up the chemical, which again are hair cells like structures, cellular extensions, microvilli. They then pick up the chemical and translate it into electricity, and that goes into the olfactory cortex, and that's in the limbic system, and then you either feel happy or unhappy, or it just tastes good or not so good. But that's that I always have to point out that the taste, smell, mostly the smell, is directly linked to the limbic system, which is the emotional brain. Taste wise, we only account for 5 different tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami, which they haven't had in the textbooks when I went to school, and that's not that long ago. Umami is the MSG kind of thing. It's the beefy. It's called beefy, actually. It's a taste that makes other things taste better. They put it a lot in different foods. It's a little inflammatory, so you won't want to eat too much of that. And then smell is a similar construction where we have a chemical in a liquid and then gets picked up by a receptor. But now these receptors are on the top of the nose. So they come down here in the nasal cavity. These odorants are volatile, so they float in the air and space, and so we can pick them up and then deliver them to the brain. Good. I think that's good enough. Let's see what else is there. Any questions to that? Are you guys doing all right?
Doing okay.
All right, good. I know. We're almost done. What we do this week in terms of we got some questions to it. We got a little bit of labeling, not too much on these terms, but then we do a visual acuity test. And in that, I want you to print out this chart, follow these directions here, where you put it on the wall, step 6 feet apart, and then do your own little vision test on yourself. And I think I say what you put down. Yeah, just answer a few questions with it, what you've learned, and upload it to Canvas. This shouldn't take you too long to do, but it's kind of a cool one to have handy. There's also a barcode that you can pick up with the phone, and you can do it on the phone as well. And then lastly, ta-da, we're going to do the pathology project thing. So now this week, we're going to start making videos. Now, not everybody's on the video front yet, but we are on the 22nd of April, and this is due on the 5th of May. So we then have 1 week to review each other's videos. And I want you to watch this video, which I took to kind of explain how we do that. But generally, this is the first time I'm sort of suggesting going on to the Zoom that I have on the homepage, that you can then meet up together and take a video of with each other. But I would, if you have a personal Zoom ID, I would suggest you take that and do that. On the homepage, sometimes I have to be added on or something to make screen share so happen, even though I open it for everyone. But a couple times it's been giving them some problems. But I think Zoom is a good format to go on as a group. I want to make, this is where I want you guys to make it as a group, unless you have an exception or is a pathology that is just you doing it alone. And then make the recording. Maybe 2 people record, so you have redundancy. And then you go into the studio, and in Studio, which is our video portal thing, you can there, look at all the stuff I have. You can there add it up here, or if you never have a video, the add button is inside the whole screen. And from there, it's very easily to then be uploaded on the activity. Where is that? Now I'm lost. I dropped out. Here. But in terms of the pathology project, I'm going very fast on that, because now is the time where if you haven't gotten full points in the week 10 assignment, make sure you upload your revised version when you have it. If you have a hard time making that, or you're still sort of lagging behind and you got the challenge to do it, because it is a big project and it's hard not to procrastinate on stuff like that, please reach out to me. I make sure this week and also next, I have plenty of time to meet up with you guys and individually help you with where you are stuck. But I need you to reach out, because if I don't know what's going on, then all of a sudden we're at the end, and then it's like, oh crap. And that's why this week, even though it's the first video week where most of you guys probably start making the video, it's still for a lot of us a week where we sort of go through the presentation again and fine tune it a little bit. You know, when you go through the presentation a few times, when I do that with my lectures, I just recite them in front of myself, try to speak words like speak it out loud, because that helps me listen in and sort of visualize or feel like, how is the audience going to take that up? And so after done a few times of that, then I can tweak the last little things, because you want to have a nice flow. And so take a little time doing that if you are at that level. But if not, again, I'm here to support you and help you in making it a product that you like and can be proud of, and we can all learn from you guys in terms of what you do. The reason why I'm doing this is because I told before, that way we all get some information about different disease processes that I don't have the ability to present in an introduction anatomy class. But I think it is important that we tying what we're learning in anatomy and in physiology, which is how things work or should work, to then what happens when things don't quite work fully anymore, which is then the pathology, which is often then in a nursing program or also a medical program the next step of discussion. All right. Anyway, that's enough said on my end. Any questions? Comments? No? Good. If not, we're all set. I wish you guys a good week, and I'm expecting a lot of your texts.
Thank you so much.
Take it easy. Thank you. Bye.